Thanks for coming back. So our first speaker after the break is going to be our own Derek Perry. So Derek is a senior biologist here at DMF, and he is our lead horseshoe crab biologist. Derek is the Massachusetts representative for our ASMFC Horseshoe Crab Technical Committee. He also participates in the Horseshoe Crab Stock Assessment Subcommittee and the Biomedical Horseshoe Crab Best Management Practices Workshop. Those are mouthfuls. As the Massachusetts horseshoe crab biologist, Derek provides fishery managers and the public with information on the population status and fishery impacts on horseshoe crabs so that managers and the public can make informed decisions.
Are we recording?
I think, yep. So come on up, Derek.
Thank you, Tracy. So my job as a state horseshoe crab biologist is basically to provide scientific advice to managers. So that means directly to Dan McKiernan, Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission. So those are the people that propose regulations and vote on them. Also means the general public. This is a public resource. So the public has a say in how a species is managed. So what I'm going to do today is talk about the data that I use to form that advice, where it comes from. So we have a commercial fishery for horseshoe crabs. There's a bait fishery, which uses horseshoe crabs for bait to catch channel whelk, which you see there in the picture. There's also a biomedical fishery, which is used to produce a product called Limonus amoebocyte lysate, or LAL. Those crabs on the right there for the biomedical firms are released back into the water. So some different data sources we have harvested data and dealer data. Let me grab my cursor 1 second. Come on. Anyway, so we have two sources of data from the commercial fishermen. The harvested data, we have harvested reports, either mass triple over reports, those are from the state fishermen, or the federal fishermen report NOAA VTRs, or vessel trip reports. So there's two different data sources from the harvesters themselves. It's usually not available till late in the next year. There's mandatory reporting, which is new. They provide data on landings by species, location, the date they were caught, the fishing method that was used, fishing effort information like tow duration, the dealer the catch was sold to, and much more information. For dealer data, it's available closer to real time. So we use that to monitor the quota. They provide data on the harvester the crabs were bought from, the landings in pounds or count for horseshoe crabs, it's count, landings value, and the port where the catch was landed. So you'll see these MATLRs and VTRs and stuff through the rest of this presentation, showing which data source was used for that figure. So there's two types of harvest in the state, hand harvest and mobile gear. There's a directed fishery using hand harvest. It provides seasonal employment, usually May and June. Most of this is closed now due to the closures we have in the state. Most of these guys participate in other fisheries, mostly shellfish. There's low barriers to entry other than a permit, so you don't need much money to invest to harvest crabs by hand, usually just a skiff, maybe some waders. It can be done with no gear at all. And there's mobile gear, it can be a bycatch or directed fishery. It kind of depends on what they're going for. If it's a bait fishery, there's only a 300 crab limit. So basically those crabs are worth about $2 a piece. That's about $600 per day. That's not going to cover the cost of that boat for a day. So, but there's also biomedical fishery, which is directed with a 1,000 crab limit. You get a little bit more for those crabs there. That they can actually make work as a directed fishery at that price. So they have the target species. They may be going for fluke or something else for the bait fishery, and they catch the horseshoe crabs as a bycatch. But they depend on a wide variety of things that they're catching: whelk, sea bass, fluke. It's all kind of a piece that kind of keeps them whole. Most of those guys participate in other fisheries, could be squid, fluke, scallops, anything else. There's high capital investments. They have larger boats, high docking fees, fuel, maintenance, there's insurance, and most of them have deckhands as well they have to pay for. So it's a lot more costly. Going into the data, in 2024, the biomedical quota was slightly below the 200,000 crab quota. For bait dealers, they hit the quota about 140,000 crabs. There were 170 crabs over. In 2023, they also almost hit the quota of 140,000 crabs for bait. The harvesters reported about 135,000 crabs. The method of harvest in 2023 was mostly hand harvest. It's a bit of a change from what it had been most recently. It's been mostly mobile gear recently. Permit types, 97% were caught by commercial horseshoe crab fishermen, with 3% by coastal access permits. Those are both limited entry permits. This is coastal access permit. So that's a permit that's.
Every dragger has to have a coastal access permit for mobile.
So this is the landings by year. The red dashed line there is our old quota at the top. The new one, the 140 is over there in the far right. You can see we've hit that last couple of years. There is a trend where it's been increasing less since about 2010, but it's come down a little bit recently with that new quota. The 2024 fishery was filled in October. So the quota was filled and stopped right there. This is looking at the comparison by year. So you can see here in that figure, the black line is 2024. You can see the impact of those new regulations where it was closed from, it's supposed to be April 15th, but got kind of started late this past year. Wasn't enacted until about the 26th of April this year, but it went to June 7th. So you can see that flat line in the black there. This is a running tally of the number of crabs that were caught. So basically you see the big flat line where no crabs are coming in, then it went up towards the quota. In 2023, there was a lot more harvest during the spawning season. You see those little gaps, those stops here. These stops where the limit closures were, but there's a lot of harvest between those limit closures. This is looking at the dealer data as far as landings by species and where they rank in terms of value. Horseshoe crabs are usually around 30th in the state. No different here. This is bait and biomedical value combined. QAQC is ongoing. The ranks are approximate because there are some species on this list that are confidential, like Atlantic red crab. There's 5 permits that are owned by 1 person, so that whole fishery is confidential, so it doesn't appear on this list. So these ranks are somewhat approximate. This is the value of bait landings and biomedical combined over time. I can see it was pretty low around 2006, 2007. It has increased a fair amount in the last couple of years, largely due to the addition of a second biomedical firm. So over $1 million in value now. So this is looking at seasonality and location of harvest. This is from 2023. This is from harvested data. The data from January, February, and March are confidential, so it's combined with April. Basically, what we have at that point in time is either 0 or 56% by hand. We have the high hand harvest in May and June. And after that, we have basically all mobile gear fishery. In 2024, I expect most of this to be dragger caught crabs because that closure in May and June. Going over to the right side there, that map, you can see where the crabs are landed from. We don't really have any landings from the North Shore or Boston Harbor. Cape Cod Bay is about 14%. Most of our crabs come from Nantucket Sound, about 80%. I expect that in 2024 and going forward, probably even more than that. There's also very low landings in Buzzards Bay. I expect that to drop because you can't really catch crabs there anymore. Because if you can't catch it by hand during the hand harvest season, it's also close to dragging all year round by regulation. So you can't really catch crabs in there by either method now. Just looking at the percent of bait landings by gear type, you can see there's been a bit of a change. It was about 90% by hand in 2007. It's dropped over time. So we did see a bit of a reverse in last year in 2023. I expect that to go back in 2024, where we have more harvest by draggers based on the new regulations. That's the expectation anyway.
Guaranteed.
Yeah. Just looking at the number of bait permits issued over time. You can see they've been dropping for a fair amount of time here. It was over 250. Those are the ones that are issued by the state. The red line is the ones that are actually active, that actually have landings. That's been dropping over time. So we're less than 50 active fishermen right now for bait. And this is for biomedical. Bit of an opposite trend. It's actually going up. With the addition of that second biomedical firm, we've seen an increase in the number of permits fishing for biomedical. So for a period of time, we only had 4 or 5 guys fishing biomedical. Now it's over 10. So the biomedical harvest is confidential. We do have a 200,000 crab quota. We can say that the quota was nearly filled in 2024, as it was in 2023. This is looking at coast-wide landings for horseshoe crabs. Number collected, it's more than doubled since 2010. Number of crabs bled has also more than doubled. Post-bleeding mortality, which is an estimate based on the number of crabs bled, they had a 15% mortality of that. That's also more than doubled. Observed mortality has also almost tripled, and total mortality that down there has more than doubled as well over that time period. So this is comparing bait to biomedical mortality. The area in orange here is bait mortality. All those crabs die because they're going to be in a pot. Biomedical estimated mortality is there on top in that blue. You can see the range there. That area in the box there is an area we have a little bit less confidence in the data there, because all we have at that point in time is harvester data. We don't have dealer data. From that 2006 period on, we have both, so kind of compare the two. So a bit more confidence in that data there. All right, so now I'm going to move over from the data the fishermen give us to the data we collect from the fishermen when we're on their boats or in their labs or wherever else. This is data from our scientists that are collecting fisheries-dependent data. So I'm going to start talking about the biomedical sampling here. We increased our sampling in 2022 at the request of conservation groups and the biomedical industry. There's a second biomedical firm that went into place in 2022. And at that point in time, the conservationists were a little concerned about that, wondering about the impacts. At the same time, the biomedical industry was also concerned because they were upset about the misinformation they thought was being spread about their industry. So they also wanted us on their boats and out at sea. So we're doing it. So for sampling trips, we're at sea on their boats during collection trips. They're harvesting for biomedical. We're on those boats. For in-water holding systems, the pens, when they're holding the crabs, we're inspecting those. We've been doing market sampling since about 2000. We continue to do that. We're also on the boats when they return the crabs to sea to release them. We're on those boats. They get about 1 to 24 hours of notice. And ASMC requires mortality to be reported. Usually it's from biomedical reports. We also collect data as state biologists. We provide both to ASMC. You can see there in the schematic there, those are the spots that we actually sample from collection in the red there. In water holding, we're not on the trucks when they bring them to the labs, but we're at the labs when they bring them in. And they either accept the crabs to be bled or eject them, put them back into holding, and they put them back in the water after that. So all those spots in red are the spots we're sampling. We also do bait sampling. So we go into the markets and bait dealers and measure the crabs there. And also get the rented crabs at the biomedical facilities. So looking at our biomedical at-sea sampling that started in 2022, the program expanded in 2023. We take tow information, tow start and end location, tow and end time. Data collected includes number kept and discarded by sex, pulmonal widths, maturity stage, especially for males, look to see if they're mature or not, shell condition, meaning molt stage. We record injury severity, any mortalities. We also record biomedical marks. There's marks on the undersides of crabs that they use at the biomedical firms. They're required to mark the crabs after they're bled. On the underside of the crab there, the sign will rotate every single year. So we do different marking every year. And each lab has their own color. So you can tell where the crabs came from. This one here was bled in 2022, recaptured in 2023. So it bears a mark from 2022, but stay with the crab over the winter. For a summary from 2024, there were 7 sampling trips on 5 different boats. 4 different scientists participated, sampling from July to November. We sampled over 3,000 crabs. No dead crabs were observed. There were 57 marked crabs that were observed in the discards, meaning the crabs that were caught on the boat and released at that point in time. Because they can't rebleed those crabs within the same year, they have to release them. Let's look at the biomedical marks from the discards. There's over 2,000 that we sampled. 57 of them were marked, so about 3%. That's a decrease from 2023, where there's 6% that were marked in our sample. For kept crabs, is looking at mortality. We sampled almost 900 crabs, didn't see any dead ones on boat. And for the rejected crabs, the crabs that were on the boat and they released for whatever reason, if they're too small, if they were injured, if they've already been bled, we sampled over 2,000 of those, and none of those were dead on the boat either. We didn't see any mortalities in 2023 or 2024. Moving on to the pens, this started in 2023. The data we collected includes time in pens, how long they're being kept in those pens, counts by sex, mortalities by sex, and environmental data like dissolved oxygen, salinity, and temperature. So if there ever was a mortality event, we could link it back to some kind of environmental data point. For 2024, there were 7 different sampling trips at 3 different locations. 4 different scientists participated and sampled from July to October. There was no mortalities for males. There was 2 mortalities for females. Overall, is a 0.1% mortality rate in pens. There were fewer pens used in 2024. The percent mortality was down from 2023, which was 0.4 in 2023. Moving on to our market sampling, this started in 2000. Until 2009, they didn't record where the crabs came from, if they were bait or biomedical, so it's hard to use that data. So most we use the data from 2009 on. We sample each lab once per month. The data collected includes pulmonal width, sex, maturity stage, especially for males. You can see in this picture here, there's a male. Cursor isn't working right now. But if it was, I'd circle that little appendage there. This one here was recently mature because it has a thumb section coming off of this appendage here. That breaks up when they mate. It's already broken off that top one there, but it hasn't broken off the other one. So we record things like that to see if they've recently become mature or not. This is looking at the number of samples we've collected over time since 2009. You can see a pretty big increase. We've really upped our game with this. We're doing a lot more sampling. So summary of the pre-bleeding mortality. So market sampling, sorry. 11 sampling trips, sampled both spots once per month, Charles River and Associates Cape Cod. 7 different scientists participated, sampled July to November. Sampled over 2,400 crabs. We saw 14 mortalities for a 0.6% mortality rate. All mortalities were observed in 2 trips on back-to-back days, where there was no obvious reason. We looked at temperature and other factors, but couldn't really figure out a reason why. Mortality prior to 2023 was rare. From 2019 to 2021, we saw no mortalities. We saw 1 in 2022, but it went up to 15 in 2023. So that's a 0.5% mortality rate. Still pretty low, but it's going the wrong direction there. Let's look at the size over time. This is for female horseshoe crabs from the Outer Cape region. Fairly steady, a little bit of a drop down the end there. That red dashed line there is our minimum legal size, which is 7 inches or 17.8 centimeters. That black line is the median by year. The top of the box is the 75th percentile. The bottom of the box is 25th percentile. Those little circles are outliers. This is looking at males, again from the Outer Cape, so Pleasant Bay, Nauset area. Really consistent over time. Let's look at Nantucket Sound, bit newer fishery there. Pretty stable last 2 years. A pretty short data set as far as number of years so far. So pre-bleeding mortality, the summary here. These are from the data that we collected. We collected on the boats. For males, we saw no mortalities at all. Females had a 1.0% mortality rate, 2% in the pens, or 0.2% in the pens rather, and 0.8 in the lab. This is consistent with the samples we got from the labs. The labs themselves report data as well, and their numbers for females were very consistent with ours. Theirs were slightly higher for males. It's hard to beat 0, so it's a little bit more than that. From 2014 to 2021, pre-bleeding mortality for each sex ranged between 0.1 and 0.3. From 2022 to 2024, it's gone up to 0.5 to 2.5. And ASMC adds that pre-bleeding mortality to their 15% estimate. So when they report biometric mortality, they're taking that 15% and adding the observed mortality on top of that. So release sampling. We're on the boats when they release these crabs too. That started in 2022, increased sampling in 2023. The data collected includes number of blood crabs we observe, number alive by sex, mortalities by sex, and also for the rejected ones, we look at them as well, number alive by sex, mortalities by sex. So those are the crabs that are rejected for whatever reason at the labs. So it was 10 different sampling trips, 5 different scientists participated, sampled from July to November, sampled nearly 2,000 crabs, we had a 1.3% mortality rate. For the ones that were rejected, there was 272 that we sampled. There was a 0% mortality rate. The post-bleed mortality rate more than tripled from 2023. It was 0.4 in 2023. And 85% of all mortalities from one sampling trip in July. So it was a little bit episodic. So just looking at our bait samples. So we'll go in the bait markets and measure crabs there as well. You can see it's increased a fair amount. We're putting more and more effort into monitoring this fishery. Look at the size over time. This is for females for bait. There is a bit of a drop here from 2008 to 2013. All the crabs are collected during May and June during the spawning season. So these are all mature crabs that are up on the beach and harvested by hand. From 2014 on, we collect them year round. As long as the fishery's going, we're out there measuring. So that includes dragger caught crabs, which aren't necessarily mature crabs that are up on the beach. They do get some smaller crabs, but still fairly consistent. That's red line is the minimum legal size there, 7 inches. So still above that, pretty fair. Same thing looking at males, fairly consistent. So for sampling in 2024, we did 48 sampling trips, measured nearly 11,000 crabs, or at least sample 11,000 crabs. We don't measure them all, so we just look for mortality. 9 different scientists participated. DMF and DFG leadership, so Division of Marine Fisheries and Department of Fish and Game, which is an agency above us, their leadership, and Mass Environmental Police inspected facilities. This is the third most observed fishery we have in the state behind only groundfish and lobster. So there's a lot of eyes on this fishery. So fisheries dependent data summary. For the bait fishery, active and fish permits continue to decrease. The 2024 quota was filled. That closed in October of this past year. The majority of harvest continues to be from Nantucket Sound. I expect more of that in the future with the new regulations. The majority of 2020 harvest occurred during the spawning season, which is now closed to fishing, and is well more than previous years. And DMF conducted 13 bait sailing trips in 2024. For the biomedical fishery, active fish permits are increasing. The quota was nearly filled in 2024, as it was in 2023. We conducted 35 biomed sampling trips. It was a 0% mortality rate for pre-bleeding crabs for males and 1% for females. Post-bleeding mortality for males was 0.6 and 1.7 for females. 3% of discarded crabs were discarded because they had a mark showing that they had bled previously that year. The size of biomedical crabs has been consistent by area over time. So now I'm going to move on to our fisheries independent surveys. These are our scientific surveys that monitor crabs. They have nothing to do with the commercial fishery. So we'll be talking about our spawning beach survey, Mass DMF trawl survey, Mass DMF seine survey. These are the three surveys we have in the state to monitor abundance. Starting off the spawning survey, this is a volunteer-based survey. We depend on volunteers to get this done. There's 16 different beaches where it's done now. It's a relative abundance survey, which means any one data point for 1 year doesn't really mean much. We need that time series to give it context over time to compare it to those other years. The longer the time series, the more context we have. It's done during the May and June full moons, new and full moons, 2 days before the moon, the day of the moon, and 2 days after the moon. These are fixed stations. There's about 16 beaches. We just lost one last year. We had 17. And there's 12 to 24 surveys scheduled per beach. If they do day and night surveys, it's 24. If they just do daytime surveys, it's 12. And it only counts adult crabs. Crabs are coming up from the beach to spawn. The 2024 data is not used because there was a different survey method used for that year. So these are the 16 different beaches that we have. Most of them on the Cape and Islands. You see the organizations that volunteer there to organize those. About half of them done by Mass Audubon. I'm going to start in Cape Cod Bay, stations 1 through 7. This is an area where there's not a lot of bait harvest. You can see the percent bait harvest for Cape Cod Bay as opposed to the entire state, ranging from 6 to 14% of the bait harvest in any given year. This is Duxbury and Plymouth Kingston Duxbury Bay. This is done by the North and South Rivers Watershed Association. The y-axis is number of female crabs per 25 square meters. And that's going to vary by beach. There's more crabs at some beaches than others. So the scale of that y-axis will change a little bit. The percentages you see on the top are the percentage of surveys that were completed. So the nighttime ones are in blue, the red ones are the daytime surveys. You'll see in Cape Cod Bay, as Chris mentioned earlier, it's similar to New Hampshire, where there's not much of a difference between day and nighttime surveys. You'll see a difference south of Cape Cod. There will be a difference there. But north of Cape Cod, Gulf of Maine, there isn't much of a difference between day and night surveys at all. So in 2024, in Duxbury, both data points, day and night, were below the time series median. Long Beach, Plymouth Kingston Duxbury Bay, Pine Barrens Alliance, 2024 again, below the time series medians for both spots. Fairly short time series. Millway, Barnstable Harbor, see the highest data points are towards the end, set a new nighttime record and daytime record in 2024. Nice little increasing trend there. Again, you see the daytime and nighttime medians. Those dashed lines are very close together. Doesn't really seem to matter to the crabs if it's day or night when they spawn, north of Cape Cod. Long pasture, also in Barnstable Harbor. Pretty good above the time series median the last few years. Moving over to Sanctuary Beach over in Wellfleet Harbor. 2024 data point was above the time series median, but not quite as high as 2022 or 2008 and 2009. Indian Neck, kind of a mixed bag there, kind of all over the place. 2024 is above the time series medians for both day and night, but it's kind of hard to pick a pattern out of this. It's kind of all over the place. Great Island. Two of the better data points in the time series, sandwiched around a goose egg there in 2023. 2024 is pretty good. It's like about the third highest data point in that time series. Moving on to the Outer Cape. This area doesn't really have any bait harvest to speak of. There was one point in one of these years where there's a small amount of bait harvest, but still rounded to zero. There's only one tiny little spot right there with little harvest of bait. Everything else is basically closed for one reason or another, either the National Seashore or the Pleasant Bay closure, which is only open for biomedical. There's been 50 years of biomedical harvest in Pleasant Bay, that area there. So it's a great place to look at the impacts of the biomedical harvests over time. It's been happening there longer than anywhere else in the world. This is Priscilla's Landing in Nauset. The last several years have been above the time series median. Nice little increasing trend. Marsh 2-3, also in Pleasant Bay. There was talk earlier about crabs spawning in marsh habitat. That's what this is. It's one of the best spots we have in the state, and they're spawning in marsh grass. So there's a bit of a difference here from this figure than other ones. This is from Massel Audubon here in the blue. This from the red is from a study at URI done by a graduate student named James Peary. So from this, we have about 24 years of data with some gaps, and it shows an increasing trend over time. The last 4 data points are the highest in the time series. So after 50 years of biomedical harvest, we're not seeing a decline here. We don't have baseline data, so we can't tell you what it looked like before the biomedical start there. Over the last 24 years, we're not seeing a decrease. Erica's Beach in Pleasant Bay, not quite as optimistic as this one. 2024 data point was above the time series median. The 2 highest data points for the first 2 of the time series. Now moving to Nantucket Sound. This is where most of the bait harvest comes from. And as of recently, a lot of the biomed too. So this is Sage Harbor. We recently picked this one up. This spot here was done around the corner from the current site originally, but that site eroded away. It no longer exists. So we picked up a new site here, working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So it's not that impressive here, but we went to the spot a few times. We saw a fair amount of crabs here. There was one night survey that was done, but it was done by a mother and son team that had never done a survey before, and they were completely overwhelmed. So they could not count males and females. And I can understand why, because there were a lot of crabs that night. So I'll show you this. So this is looking at the number of crabs they saw overall. There's about 60 crabs per quadrat. So it's a lot of crabs. There were some spots that were getting 100 crabs per quadrat at the most. So they're having a hard time distinguishing males from females from that. To put that in perspective, they had 100 crabs in one quad. If you look at Great Island and Wellfleet, in the last 4 years, they've seen 102 crabs. So they saw more crabs, almost as many crabs in one quadrat in 5 meters than they've seen in 4 years in Great Island. Bass River, done by Eric Hunter. New record in 2024, day and night. One-Way Beach, this is in Nantucket. It's not on the island off of Chatham. New record in 2024. And again, you start to see that spread between the daytime surveys and nighttime surveys, where they're much more likely to spawn at night in Nantucket Sound, south of Cape Cod. Warren's Landing, Nantucket, again, new record in 2024. Bit of an outlier there. It's a lot higher than the other ones. But you still see a general increasing trend over time. Tashmoo, there was only one survey done at Tashmoo this past year. It was done by the Lagoon Pond Association. Thank you, Maria. It was only one spot, one day. It was the end of the survey season, but it still had a pretty good count there for that one day. It was past what I would expect to be the peak, but still had a fair number of crabs there. So it's only one data point. Moving over to Buzz's Bay, not much harvest here. We have one site here now. We had a couple more at one point in time, but we're down to one. Pretty poor trend there, going down. So a little bit of a spoiler alert. I'm going to do some statistics on some of these. This is the only statistically significant trend we have that's negative. It's the only one over the last 15 years. So let's look at the completion percentage of each beach over time. Prior to 2013 and prior, we had a lot of red spots there where not many surveys were conducted. From 2015 on, it's pretty isolated to certain beaches, but we're getting a lot better completion percentage, which is a really good thing. So the ones in green have 75% or more of the beaches surveyed covered. If it's in yellow, it's between half the surveys and 75% are covered. In red, there's less than half the surveys are covered. A lot more coverage for some of these beaches, which is a really good thing. So summarizing now, so we have the region there, Cape Cod Bay, Outer Cape, Nantucket Sound. We have the 5-year mean of bait landings from those regions. And also if it has biomedical, it's noted there too. We have the beaches, where they're done day and night. And a comparison between the 2024 data point and the time series median. You see most of the ones are kind of isolated. The Plymouth Kinks and Duxbury Bay, they're below. And Buzz's Bay, they're also below. These are areas with very little harvest. Areas with more harvest are doing fairly well. So in 2024, 74% of the spots that have 74% of the spots were above the time series median, 26 were below. Record highs were set in 2024 at Millway at nighttime. That's a 17-year time series. Bass River, day and night, has an 8-year time series. Monomoy Beach, day and night surveys, that is a 16-year time series. Warren's Landing at night had a 14-year time series. It broke a new record. Then Tash Move is only based on one data point, so that's a little cheap, but it's a 16-year time series for that one. There was one record low that was at Long Beach for day and night surveys as a 6-year time series. So looking at ranks by beach, see the Outer Cape is pretty well represented at the top. The best beach was Marsh 2-3, over 2 crabs per 25 square meters. And then you have the rest of them down there, going down to Swifts and Great Island. There's a bit of a range here between the Cape Cod Bay and Buzz's Bay sites and the Nantucket Sound and Outer Cape sites. On the right side, you see the nighttime surveys. You can see how much higher the nighttime surveys are in Nantucket Sound than they are during the day. So we have Warren's Landing there, 2 crabs, only 0.1 during the day. So there's a big difference between day-night surveys in Nantucket Sound, south of Cape Cod. And then the Stage Harbor, where we didn't count the data, but the fewest crabs they saw, fewest female crabs they saw in a quad was 6. They had as many as 30. There was a few where they had 22 plus and didn't have exact numbers, so we couldn't really use that. But if they had had that data, it would have beat Warren's Landing. So one of the things we're really trying to do this year is get more people out on those beaches, especially Stage Harbor, to do more counts there, because that's where most of the fishery is now, both the bait and biomedical fishery. So it's an important spot to monitor. So this is looking at records over time. So this is just one walk down a beach, one individual survey. You have the beach here, the region, the date of the record, total number of crabs, total crab density, because some beaches are longer than others, so that varies a little bit. The number of surveys completed, so you get an idea of how many surveys are completed to see how big that data point is. In 2024, we had 4 new survey records, record highs. Stage Harbor broke 1,000. Warren's Landing had a new record. Monomoy and Nantucket Sound had a new record, and Millway had a new record. So you get 15-year spawning trends. 75% have increasing trends. 25% are decreasing. There are 4 statistically significant trends that are increasing. Swift's Beach day-night surveys are declining and statistically significant. There's greater uncertainty in some of the early years of the survey because a lot of them had fewer percentage of surveys covered, but that's not the case with Swift's Beach. Swift's Beach is pretty well covered. Looking at the 10-year trends, using the Mann-Kendall, which is a method of looking at data for time series. Basically what it's looking for is monotonic trends, so going one direction if it's going up or going down. This is saying that 90% of the spawning survey sites are going up, only 10% are decreasing in the last 10 years. If you use a linear model, that goes to 80% and 20%. So still really positive, but not quite as positive as the Mann-Kendall. There's 7 sites that are statistically significant using both methods, and 0 sites with significant decreases. Again, you see the spots where there's more harvest are actually doing a little bit better, which I'm guessing is because of the regulation changes from 2010. So basically what we had in 2010, we initiated those spawnings, lunar closures, and areas with very little harvest, you're not gonna see much of an increase if there's no harvest there. It's not gonna have any impact. But areas where there was harvest, you're seeing an impact. So this is kind of to point out the areas we really need to survey. This is from our trawl survey on the left side here. It shows where the crabs are caught in that trawl survey. Most of them are just south of Cape Cod. We have 2 sites in that area, Stage Harbor and Bass River. It's really important that we monitor those spots because that's where the commercial fishery is. That's where biomet is, that's where bait is. So we really need to monitor these sites to monitor the fishery. So it's kind of a plea to get more volunteers for that region. These are the survey dates for this coming year, starting on May 10th. May 10th, we're gonna have a training session at Stage Harbor if anyone wants to go. 10:45 on Saturday, May 10th at Stage Harbor. If you want more information, come see myself or Laura after the talks. Now moving on to the trawl survey. It's another relevant abundance survey, so it depends on that long time series. This one has one, it's 47 years now. There's a spring survey, which is done in May, and a fall survey done in September. It's a random stratified design, which is based on depth and geographic range. There's 100 stations per survey, and 1 tow is done per station. This survey captures juveniles and adults. It's used to assess, the survey itself is used to assess many different species. The 2020 season was missed due to COVID. So you'll see a gap in these figures coming up. These are different regions, 1 through 5, in the depth strata. So basically for horseshoe crabs, we only see crabs for the most part in the shallowest 2 strata, 0 to 30 and the 30 to 60. So that's what you're gonna see in these figures coming up. Survey started in 1978. It's used the same boat since 1982, and it's sexed crabs since 1982. So because of the boat change and because of their sex, we use data from 1982 on. They record the number of crabs per tow and the weight per tow. They also collect individual widths of the crabs, as well as the location captured. So this is a figure showing the spring and fall seasons. It's a bit dated, but the point of this is to show where crabs are caught in the survey. There's a lot of crabs caught just south of Cape Cod in the spring, a little bit in Cape Cod Bay from over by Sandwich over to Truro, a little bit off of Plymouth, and very few in other spots. In the fall, they kind of aggregate over towards Monomoy, northeast Nantucket Sound. So this is looking at the survey trends for the Gulf of Maine area, where there isn't much harvest. This is number of crabs per tow. There's no statistically significant trends in this region. You can see in the spring survey, a lot of zeros there. They don't catch many crabs in the spring season. In the fall, it's come down a little bit. If you came here a couple of years ago, you saw this trend coming up, but now with these data points down here, it's coming back down below the time series median. This is looking at the proportion of tows containing crabs. So sometimes you see a lot of crabs in 1 tow. This shows how spread out those crabs are. We're getting in multiple tows across different spots. So you can see for the most part, a lot of zeros in the spring survey, both males and females. In the fall here, it's come down a little bit for females. The males kind of spiked up a little bit, second highest data point, which shows for the males in the fall, they're a bit more spread out than other time periods. This is southern New England, where most of the harvest is. You see the spring survey is there. It's trending upward. We're not quite seeing that same record highs we were up there just fairly recently. It's come down a little bit, but still well above the time series median. And the fall survey, kind of right near the time series median. Doesn't really stray too much. There are significant trends here. For spring females for 20, 25, 30, 35, and 40 years, it's significant. For spring males, it's 20, 25, and 30 years. And for 35 and 40, it's significant with the linear model, but not the Mann-Kendall. All those trends are increasing. This is looking at number of crabs per tow, or sorry, proportion of tows with crabs. Similar trends. Big increase in the spring for both males and females, and a little bit above the time series median there for fall. Now moving on to our seine survey. This is a beach seine. They haul through some of these estuaries we have here. Great Pond, Wacoit Bay, Cotuit Bay, Lewis Bay, Bass River, and Stage Harbor. Started in 1976. Horseshoe crab has only consistently been counted since 1984. It's done those 6 different embayments. It's designed for age 0 winter flounder. We also collect crab data too. It monitors abundance of many estuarine species, including some that eat horseshoe crab eggs, and collects counts or presence absence data. For horseshoe crabs, it's counts. The seine survey is used in the Newark stock region for the stock assessment for ASMSC. So basically what we have here is a net. There's a float line that goes to the surface of the water, a lead line here, which will fold down, come along the bottom, kind of pick up any crabs that are there or anything else. This is the index from that. Stratified mean number per tow. This is based on area, so meters squared. So the numbers here are a lot smaller than the other surveys you saw previously because it's by meter squared as opposed to per tow. You see an increasing trend there. No data points below the time series median in about a decade. It's statistically significant for the last 20, 35, 30, and 35 years using Mann-Kendall or linear model. So fisheries independence summary for 2024, 74% of the beaches are above the time series medians. 5 beaches set new time series record highs. 1 beach set a new record low. For the 15-year trends, 75% of the indices are increasing. 4 have statistically significant and increasing. Swift's Beach being the exception to that. Day and night surveys are significantly decreasing. The 10-year trends, 89% of the indices are increasing depending on which method you use for stats. 7 are statistically significant and increasing. There are none that are significant and decreasing. For the trawl survey, there's more mixed results there. North of Cape Cod, females are below the time series medians in 2024. Males were at or above the time series medians in 2024. South of Cape Cod, all 2024 data points, both sexes, both seasons, were above the time series medians. The spring survey was above the time series medians for both the last 10 years for both sexes. And statistically significant increase in trends over the last 20 to 40 years using Mann-Kendall and or linear model for both sexes. The same survey, it's been trending up since 2009, above the time series medians for the last 10 years, and statistically significant over the last 20 to 35 years. So very positive results, increasing trends. I'd like to thank many people for this. The fishers, dealers, and biomedical labs for welcoming us in the boats, facilities, and labs. Fishers and dealers for filling out their catch reports so we can analyze these data. The DMF Resource Assessment Program for providing data on the trawl survey and seine survey. The stats program, which provides the data from us that go through the commercial fishermen and they audit and QC it, which is greatly appreciated. The DMF staff who collected the data, and Andre Schmidt from UMass IT for helping with this presentation. And of course, the volunteers who help with the spawning survey, Mass Audubon, Eric Hunter, Pine Barrens Alliance, Northern Suffolk Watershed Association, Maria Mitchell, the Kentucky Conservation Association, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Last year, there's 271 different people who participated in the spawning survey, which kind of speaks to how important this is to people as a resource. People are really involved with this and they really enjoy it. So I think that really speaks a lot to it. If anyone wants more information, there's a few data sources here. If you want to know the regulations, if you want to know what the trends are, if you want to see the figures, it's all here.
And Derek, you can email this presentation.
This will be given to anyone on the list. So if you're not on the list that I sent the original email to, send me an email. I'll send this presentation. It's also being recorded. So if you want to sign up for DMF advisories, which I would recommend, you can go to the site here, click on this part here, and this box will pop up. Click on that there for commercial fishing and seafood advisory dealers. That'll pop up. And then click on lobster, crabs, and vertebrates. You can select horseshoe crabs. If you're also interested in other species that impact horseshoe crabs, you can also select whelks and fluke because those fisheries also impact horseshoe crabs. With that, I'll take any questions. Paul?
Derek, way back in the beginning when you showed the value of the fisheries in Massachusetts, I kind of read it quickly, but I didn't see anything for eel or conch. Well, are they on that list?
They were on that list, yeah. Let me go back to it.
Let's see what they were.
Eels will not be because we don't really have a fishery for that.
It's so small, it doesn't show
It's,
up.
yeah.
Below the level, okay.
Phil, did you have a question while doing this?
I did. I'll tell you, that's very encouraging, seeing the uptrend. And I know DMF's worked with the commission and they've done a lot of conservation measures over the years. And I think it's going to get a heck of a lot better. Just based on the recent management measures, we're not even seeing the results of that yet.
That's a very good point.
It's going to be
We're not going to see that for another 10 years.
Yep.
So it's coming, but it's still a ways off to see the impacts of that more recent closure.
Yeah,
So
it's going to be looking forward to it. Thank you.
Channel Oaks down at 25.
Yeah.
And
46.
the other, Eels doesn't make sense.
eels is not on there. Eels are very small.
So Derek, question for you. Talking about Swift's Beach and declining trends in the spawning survey. And I guess you also mentioned that Buzzards Bay, or you showed in the data that you presented that has very little
Harvest.
harvest at all of bait crabs. Suspected that will go lower because you can't net fish in Buzzards Bay.
Right. Bait or
That's
biomedical.
really- There isn't any biomedical harvest going on there either.
Could you
So-
repeat the question?
Sure. Oh, sorry. So what I'm asking about is Swift's Beach in Buzzards Bay, which is showing a declining trend. Yet we don't really see any significant bait and or any biomedical harvest there. And so what I was gonna ask Derek is if he could maybe speculate or give us any indicators as to why you think the trends are declining there.
So we have one spot there, so it's kind of hard to identify this as a bay-wide issue. But there's another beach by my house, which I go to occasionally off these spawning events, where I see a lot of crabs still. It's a spot that was surveyed back in 2008, 2009 over by Nashley Dike. But we see crabs there. We're seeing a definite decline here. But there's also beach grooming going on here, which we see a fair amount of time, almost every year. We've talked to the town of Wareham to kind of stop that because we're seeing it during the spawning season. So after this, we go down there, we'll see crabs, then they'll rake the entire beach. They do it at low tide to remove the algae and things that have come up from the beach. But the weird part is at high tide, there's no beach there anyway. So there's really no point, in my opinion, to grooming these beaches. I wouldn't expect that to have a big impact if it's just one beach, but the town of Wareham does all their beaches, it seems. So if you're doing that whole region there, it could have an impact in that small area. Yeah.
We have a question online from Dave Smith. He says, some claim that a substantial amount of horseshoe crab harvest is unreported. Does the mass data support or refute that claim?
So every year for the annual compliance report that I have to give to ASMFC, I have to talk to the environmental police about any infractions they occurred, and there hasn't been one for a while. I also talked to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife officers as well. They haven't had one in a while. They had one guy for U.S. Fish and Wildlife who was near the line for Monomoy, but there's been no evidence of poaching, according to them. Switch. All right, thanks, guys.